I think a really good way to start this conversation is, Deloitte, it has been known, I think what was it, 2018, there was another report that came out that was on regarding total rewards. It was very popular. And I guess my question is now that we're in 2025, you know, that's not too long ago when that
Mhm.
report was created, but I'm really curious, like what sparked the interest in pursuing this recent study only a few years later, and what happened from that?
Oh, Jason, gosh, I love the question because our 2018 high impact rewards study, yeah, it it kind of broke a little bit of a mold. And what we learned there was rewards were just kind of meh, right? That employees weren't necessarily excited about their total rewards offering. And there was a number of reasons why that was the case, whether that was, the information wasn't being shared in a good and appropriate way that got the eyeballs and the attention of the workforce. Rewards weren't necessarily designed with employees at the center. And so, you know, we looked really long and hard at those details. And then, Jason, there was a global pandemic. And the one thing that that global pandemic did was it really put a spotlight on how are organizations showing up for their workforce during a time of unprecedented disruption. Right. There was an external influence that fundamentally changed how employees looked at their employer for support and then the way that the employer found themselves really emphasizing what they can, should, and would do from a total rewards perspective. And so, post pandemic and then very early 2024, we realized that the total rewards experience that our clients were talking about and their reactions to the 2018 survey, it was misaligned. And so it almost begged, Jason, the opportunity to refresh. And so that's what we did. And if you'll allow me, because I want to talk about how we got to this study. It began really by doing interviews and talking with total rewards leaders out there about their expectations, their everyday lived experiences of taking care of their workforce. And that began to form the foundation of a survey. And that survey we distributed out. We got replies from over 700 organizations. We took those results, and what our high impact rewards research does is it looks at the answers to questions, and then it also looks at the business success, right? The organizational success that those that are responding are having out in the marketplace. And what we're looking for is a little bit of correlation in those answers. What are organizations that are, financially responsible, successful? What are they doing from a total rewards perspective, and where are their similarities? That helps us get to a maturity model. But there was an additional analysis, right? We can look at survey results, we can analyze and we can compare and we can come up with a maturity model, but we then needed to go back and test that. So we went out to those same 25 representatives, began to show them the results and find out how does this resonate. And it was aligned very much to their experiences. There was 7 key findings that effectively came out from our high impact rewards research, all things that you can find on LinkedIn. But Jason, I'll be excited to share any of those findings in this conversation with you.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to go into that next. But just as a quick follow-up, you said something that really struck a chord with me. You mentioned that, of the 700 different organizations that responded, that were interested in participating, et cetera. You talked about how rewards were kind of meh for a while or meh for a while. And there was one part of that you mentioned that you were talking about total rewards leaders. And I just wanted to, out of curiosity, if there's a segmentation in your own experience in this where you felt that there are the total rewards leaders, but then also leaders of total rewards. And I would love to get kind of in your head from some of these findings, what organizations are have been doing from that perspective. Like does it change? If you own total rewards, is your visions one place? And if you're a C level, et cetera, that manages or oversees that total rewards leader, is there a different perspective that you're seeing?
So I'm not sure that I'd call it a different perspective, but what I would say is kind of a fundamental shift from 2018 to our recent study is in 2018, I think you almost looked at organizational strategy separate from total reward strategy, that those weren't designed to support each other. Or in practice, organizations weren't necessarily thinking about, how do we take care of our workforce via your total reward strategy that helps that workforce help us achieve our business objectives, right? Those things were sometimes built separately and not supporting each other. And I think that's one of those fundamental changes that happened from 2018 to 2024. The C-suite leaders began to understand that just as we need to be agile in terms of our business objectives, so too do we need to be agile about what we're doing from a total rewards perspective, how we're showing up for our workforce, from the rewards that we provide to them and their families, to the way that we commit to the well-being of our workforce, and we bring in ways of working. That's a reward. We bring in the idea of flexibility as a reward. Those things started showing up. And then finally, recognition as another place where there's just been a shift in the way that C-suite is committing to taking care of the workforce, and looking at CHRO and total rewards leadership to say, help us create a differentiated experience, an irresistible place to work, but be mindful of balance sheet impact. Let's make sure that what we are doing is fundamentally aligned to our business objectives and our people promises.
All right, that is perfect. And that is like that you just the perfect layup to the next question, to which is about the what your findings were. Is, I think for the benefit of the folks on this session and that are listening now and later, would you be able to maybe identify, let's say, three out of the seven findings that you think are particularly relevant for this audience, or just that are sort of just out of all of seven were the most staggering or interesting to you?
But tough question, Jason, because they were all interesting to me. I mean, and that's part and parcel of being passionate about total rewards. Is you want to understand, like, what are the trends, what are the things that are going to impact us from a delivery perspective because of the expectations of people as customers of total rewards. So I think they were all uniquely interesting, but you've asked a question, so I'm going to touch on those. The first one that I thought was really interesting was this end of information asymmetry. This was finding number 6 in our study. And the end of information asymmetry is an acknowledgement that a progressive strategic view of employee communications around total rewards shifted dramatically between 2018 and 2024. I think traditionally, information about rewards was sort of pushed. It was generally email, emails that oftentimes were put into a very important folder outside of your customary inbox, maybe to never be read again. And the challenge that we understood was happening in between the study is that if you as an organization are not taking a progressive forward approach to employee communications about the benefits that you offer and the value that those benefits bring, then employees are going to look for information anywhere that they can get it. And they will go outside of your organization, at which point they become believers in the narrative that's put in front of them. And so the end of information asymmetry was this idea that we have the ability to integrate providers. We have the ability to curate an experience that is customizable to individuals based on their demographics, to make sure that benefit information isn't scattered, it's consolidated. And that in that consolidation, Jason, what is really the high maturity organizations are doing is thinking about the customization to say, what data about benefits would be most relevant to this particular individual? So let's use my example. Jason, I think your example too. We both have younger children. We're interested in benefits that truly support our ability to maybe save for college. Those are the things that mature organizations have finally understood. Pull it together so that employees become fundamentally aware of and value the benefits that are unique to their needs, to their families' needs. So that I thought was really great. I loved this idea of transparency and fairness showing up in rewards. And I know that there was a question in the chat that was about trust. That has become, a driving force, sometimes through legislative reasons, but other times to this idea of transparency, of making sure that employees are aware of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and that from a fairness perspective, you are continuously measuring and auditing yourself to make sure that either from a compensation perspective or benefits availability, that you are showing up to your workforce in ways that acknowledge geographic spread, availability, and making sure that the rewards that you have enabled are available to your workforce in a fair, transparent, equitable way. When that's done, that fosters trust, and that trust creates that idea of connection, creates the amplification of MPS. It creates, truly that irresistible place to work. Third one, but I guess I got to talk about recognition, Jason, for a moment. And here's really the interesting thing. Recognition in terms of the dimensions, the factors of maturity was not on the radar in 2018. It wasn't a driving influence on the maturity of an organization. Sure, right? Recognition has existed for a very long time. Service awards being, sort of the benchmark within the marketplace. But what we found from 2018 to 2024 is the importance of the visibility to recognition has absolutely skyrocketed. Service anniversaries continue to be, table stakes benefits as it relates to acknowledging and appreciating employees who provide tenure back to your organization. But so much more has really happened. So much more in terms of the ability to provide non-monetary recognition. I think customarily known, Jason, shout outs, right? But doing it in a public forum, demonstratively, using language that truly acknowledges what people are doing and the impact that they're having on their peers, on their leaders, achieving overall business objectives. I think that was really striking, and frankly, as a recognition enthusiast, I was really happy to see that. Peer-to-peer monetary-based recognition, the idea that we're all in this together, so that when somebody does something that fundamentally impacts you in a very positive way, you have a means by not just providing that verbal thank you, that written thank you amplified to the rest of the organization, but that you can put some money behind it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a lot. Our study just said something there can really go a long way. And then the last part that, again, this was maybe a belief going into it, but amplified in the findings, this idea of leader to team recognition. Again, the idea that we're all in this together, and that no single person is responsible for the success of a project, of a sales figure, of business success. It's a team effort. And so when a leader can show demonstratively that ability to thank the team, both in words and in some type of financial or experience-based recognition, really goes a long way, and that really kind of popped in the study. So, Jason, I could talk about all of them, but I think that those are the three that I truly appreciated as a total rewards professional myself.
Fascinating. And I think one thing in particular that you touched on that really grabbed my attention was it's I was nodding my head and I had myself on mute because I kept going, because I was like, yes, this is great. And there was a moment when you were you isolated the two different mindsets, right? Which is mindset one is recognition and rewards is sort of a monetary like milestone experience, whereas on the other side there's these non-monetary rewards and recognition experiences that are invaluable. But I love the way that you kind of brought them both together and say one does not work with the other without the other. And I think that's something that I really wanted to touch on next, which is it seems that, so many organizations, regardless of the endless amounts of research that for example, Deloitte has done, the data shows, right, that, that this is fundamentally a clear path in terms of getting an organization to perform the way you want it to.
Mhm.
But I'm curious. Let me just say it correctly for you here: is that um, total rewards do tend to still be treated like an expense a lot of the times because of that milestone mindset, right? And so if you're how do you really see, especially between the two studies, in the difference after the pandemic, how do you see it as a competitive differentiator rather than just an expense?
Yeah, love the question, and I think unfortunately, this has kind of been that thing that sits under total rewards, which is the idea of, are we spending the right amount of money? Are we getting the value from that spend? And that's always going to be a question. I think what I would point Jason you to for this question is this. There was a very clear correlation that we saw that said organizations that demonstrate these particular dimensions, strategies as it relates to total rewards. When organizations demonstrate some of these things, they show an increased maturity in terms of their total rewards offering. And why is that important, right? Because of the correlation that I explained earlier, that with a higher total rewards maturity, so too do you see organizations achieving business objectives, right? There's that idea of, if what we desire to do is to be successful as an organization, we cannot do that without our people. And how do we take care of our people? What are the things that truly matter? That's what we honed in on in this study. And if you don't mind, I shared some slides with you maybe a couple days ago, and would love just for the audience to see this maturity model, because I think, Jason, it's going to help demonstrate a little bit of what we saw. So for those watching, this is our maturity model, levels 1 through levels 4. It's a traditional Deloitte point of view as it relates to maturity. And when we looked at the answers across all of those surveys and then we compared with business objectives, what we saw was correlations of organizations where they looked at their total rewards in a transaction or siloed point of view. So what does that mean? That means, looking at it not necessarily with experience driving, decision making, and not necessarily gathering employee input to help inform decision makings. And then, finally, Jason, if for some of those organizations, it means total rewards operating in their isolated silo within HR. So maybe not thinking about a broader experience where you are integrating what the folks in talent acquisition are seeing and feeling, as they're testing the marketplace for new talent. You're not aligned with the performance management team, who's really like the most demonstrative way that total rewards sometimes shows up with the salary increases, bonuses, etc. So as you begin to go up the maturity, a few things happen. And those things are a lot more integrated conversations are happening, a lot more reliance on technology and reporting and analytics to drive future state decision making. Um, Getting to nimble and intentional. These were actually very deliberately chosen words, right? Because what we're seeing as you get up to level 4 is organizations that say, from a business objective standpoint, we have to demonstrate agility, right? We have to be able to move with the market when there is an internal disruption or an external disruption. We have to flex and bend accordingly to be able to meet the objectives that we've set out as an organization. To do that, you also need to be nimble and intentional as it relates to your total reward strategy. I share all of this, Jason, because if we go back to your question, and your question is, how do we truly demonstrate value from a total rewards perspective? right? I would actually call your attention. Maybe let's go forward one more slide because I'd call your attention to for organizations at level 3 or level 4, you're starting to see some of the things that they are doing, and that in doing so, they are taking care of their talent, and their talent is helping them achieve their business objectives. There is effectively this rewards relationship that has been established where your workforce feels taken care of. There's that, again, that level of trust that happens. And that in doing so and providing this type of experience, they too are going to do what they can to help you achieve their business objectives. They're going to show up every day. They are going to be their most authentic and productive selves. They're going to advocate for you in the marketplace in ways that you will have a talent pipeline excited about the opportunity of joining your organization because of the way that you take care of your talent. So maybe long way of getting to the answer, Jason, but I thought it's important to understand that those organizations that truly are, world class in terms of, how they're achieving their business objectives, so too are they thinking about world class ways to take care of their workforce.
I love that. And I think, and I can't remember if we talked about this the other day when we were just kind of catching up, but it's as a marketer, right? Like I sort of inherently think of the idea behind like an attribution model, right? And it's never as simple as, well, I ran an ad here and it did not net me the relationship I wanted here. But the story is much larger than that. There were multiple layers, multiple channels involved in order to make that a success for sales, for, rev from a revenue standpoint, et cetera. And I see no difference in this, to have any type of initiative like this in a silo seems, could be very damaging or just, not effective. Whereas,
Yeah, I wouldn't say
yeah,
damaging. I'd say
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
it's not as effective, it's not as optimized as it really could be.
yeah. Yeah, and that's where I guess where I was kind of going in my head was the it's almost like there's like a mindset, right, where they have to check the box. Like, okay, we have this in place, therefore, right? And then okay, and then once you start checking boxes, you're gonna then push it over to say, HR, this is yours. Own it and win it. But it's if I'm following you correctly, what you're learning is that the more that these initiatives fall, they can still be owned or executed by HR, whoever, but the intention behind it, the vision behind it, very quickly filters up to what CFOs, COOs, CEOs are thinking about in terms of how they're going to grow their organization. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. I think that when CEO, CHRO, CFO are working symphonically, and they're thinking about business objectives and talent goals, people promises, when that's working and it's working really well. And by the way, there's another third, sort of pillar there, which is sensing your workforce to understand needs, concerns, opportunities. When that's really happening, it's amazing. You don't need to think about, benchmarks and keeping up with the Joneses. What you're doing is you're creating that experience within your own organization that's going to resonate with your own workforce. And again, that's what we saw here. There was a point, Jason, that I missed on the previous slide, and it ties back to an earlier question that I'd love just to share with the audience, which is we talked about 2018 and we talked about 2024 and the fundamental shifts that happened. The idea of meh to now, really something well established. Jason, if you look at the chart right here, what you're seeing is 41% of the participants that we surveyed, and then when we explored their data, we looked and said they are all demonstrating capabilities that suggest level 3, level 4 maturity, which was fantastic swing when you compare this same level 3 and level 4 in 2018. And you see it right here on the slide, right? 2018, only 20% of organizations got to level 3 or level 4 maturity. And I'll break it down even further. It was 16% were in level 3, 4% were in level 4. And so what that tells you is that that these organizations or any organization has understood just how important total rewards is to the broader employee experience, and they focused in on that. They've made it a priority, and the results are showing up in our data. I'll also share, and it's not on the slide. In 2018, we asked NPS style questions, Net Promoter Score. Would you advocate for your organization? And all of us that are passionate around total rewards were sad when we saw the results in 2018 because it's in the negative 15, right? So what that told us, Jason, is like rewards was detracting from the experience, which fundamentally made no sense to any of us who thought so much money is being spent on designing and delivering rewards that can and should meet employees' needs and concerns. And yet employees came back from, participants came back from the survey and just said, it's really not happening. 2024, so positive 37 NPS. I mean, it's just such a massive swing that happened over those years, largely attributed, we presume, in the focus and attention that came from total rewards, and maybe that expanded definition that total rewards isn't just compensation and benefits. It's so much more. It's the things that an organization enables for you as a reward for your loyalty, your service, your tenure. And I think with that and the commitments that were made, the folks taking the survey acknowledged just how important total rewards was to their overall experience.
I love that. And it's just thank you for taking it back to this slide because it's like it seems to me that there are just so clearly so many organizations can find themselves in a different part of where this maturity model falls, right? And kind of just digesting everything that you just shared, it's like, okay, organizations, they're spending a lot of money on whether they're successful or not. There's a lot of investment, right? Investment in resources, investment in assets, investment in the strategies and third parties, whatever it may be. But where are you kind of seeing orgs thinking about like where they need to be kind of like keeping their reward spend and how does it relate to the maturity model as they're growing? Because my assumption is level one should have a very different plan than level four. That's just at least my assumption.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's about plan. It's about commitment to the elements that create differentiation, right? And so, let's give an example because I think that that's always important. Um, for an organization to be really mindful of balance sheet impact, you almost have to break that thought pattern that says, okay, well, what's new in the marketplace? What's the newest reward that organizations are offering? And then begin to build a strategy that's sort of chasing the next new thing. Um, while I think that that strategy does enable certain rewards that will resonate to parts of your population, I think that what this study told us is that for those organizations that take a more disciplined, approach to employee sensing, so not necessarily utilizing annual engagement surveys that offer a small handful of rewards-focused questions, but actually sensing your workforce in real and deliberate ways about their experience of total rewards, their needs and concerns, both as individuals and from their families' perspective, and then utilizing that data to take action, deliberate action, and isolate and identify on places where total rewards can, should, and will show up to be able to provide the means by which employees can utilize something for their benefit and for their family's benefit. That idea of being employee centric in the way that you design is becoming much more part of a table stakes component to accessing these higher levels of maturity, because with that you can make some very deliberate choices about how and where you choose to invest that isn't about chasing, sort of what the next new benefit is that's out in the marketplace, but really doubling down on the places that really matter to your workforce. And yeah, I think that's the big part of it. It comes with a caveat though, Jason, which is going to be if you take that time to ask the workforce about the things that matter from a total rewards perspective, then you have to be prepared to act on it, right? And that's what you see with some of these level 3, level 4 organizations is their willingness to act on it, their willingness to reinvest, right? To be nimble, to think about how and where are we going to place our bets and make financial commitments across our total reward strategy in places that we know will resonate with our workforce, and we know it because we asked and we're ready to act on it.
All right, so that is very powerful. And in particular, I'm going to make an assumption that the majority of the folks listening to you go through this very articulately are thinking, okay, great. How do I bring this maturity model to the board, to my C levels in a
Mhm.
way that I can show it as like an early indicator of like resilience, financial success, talent risk, whatever it may be?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's first important to realize this, Jason, is that there are dimensions. You saw it on the next slide that we shared with the audience earlier. There's a number of things that reflect the actions, the intentions, the strategy of level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 organizations, right? But what's important, I think, for a leader who is looking at this maturity model is that you don't need to be level 4 in all of these things. You don't necessarily need to be level 3 in any of these things. It's important to look and say, where do we believe that we need to place our bets? Where do we want to be known as to our workforce? Do we want to think about recognition as a competitive differentiator, and that's where we're going to sort of double down our investments? Do we want to think about our communication strategy and commit to an integrated experience across all of our total rewards providers and create that sort of single portal for employees to find information and be able to act on it? It's really, Jason, it's not about this idea of continued investments on all of these bullets on number 4, and that if we do that, then we become a high performing organization. It's really about what do we think really matters to our workforce? What have we heard, and where are we willing to commit to make sure that our workforce understands, utilizes, appreciates what we've made available to them, and then how do we amplify that, both internally and externally, making the organization again that sort of irresistible place to work. I think that's really what it's about. I think the idea of simply going and saying, okay, let's look at all of these bullets on level 4 and let's do all of these things. Check, 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 check. It's certainly a strategy. It's a costly one. And so this is sort of that opportunity. Pick and choose where you want to differentiate and and then communicate that differentiation to your workforce, build it with them, and then watch as employees demonstrate that value back to you.
I think if I'm hearing you correctly, Mike, it seems to me that unfortunately there's no easy button. There's no follow these 5 bullets and you're off to the races and everything's going to be unicorns dancing and deers singing and birds flying and all the fun stuff, right? But what is seems to be consistent is to what you were just saying is the more organizations take a step back and say, what kind of organization are we trying to run here? Why do we exist? What type of environment, what type of activities, incentives, etc., would influence the right people to want to work in this organization and thus create the experience that we're trying to create in the first place?
No, you just nailed it, Jason, which is that human beings are drawn to certain industries, certain sectors, they're drawn to certain type of work. And so the idea of, that five-step check the box and everything works well doesn't take into account human condition, right? And the human beings that seek out and want to do certain type of work in certain type of circumstances. And so it's why there's no map. There's no secret sauce here. There is the idea of who is the organization that we aspire to be? Who are the people that aspire to work at that organization? And what are the needs and the concerns that that type of worker is looking for us to support them on, right? And I think that when you take that particular mindset, it helps you determine how and where to invest resources in a way that's going to amplify both the impact of that investment and then the appreciation that the workforce is going to have over the things that you've made available. So a big part of it, absolutely.
It seems that at times that people kind of get like lost in the tactics. And like it seems like, and by tactics, I mean there's your traditional methodologies around, you know, what rewards they are. There's modern, and then there's the not, you know, whether it's monetary, non-monetary. I would love to kind of get your insight and your own experiences, especially as you after you talked and learned from all these different organizations. I feel the drawn that there's so many folks that are still looking for that easy button. They're still looking for those check boxes. And so they're trying to just equate that because of X, Y, and Z, either it works or it doesn't. And it's just I know it's so much larger. I mean, everything you're saying to me and everything in the report here is so clearly stating that there is no easy answer. It's a unique experience per organization, et cetera. But the consistency is that hybrid, that mixture of traditional, non-traditional, monetary, non-monetary that you're seeing the best results so far.
And I think, Jason, what really sort of underpins it, and I think this came through in the study and what we talked about earlier, was the idea of, being agile, being competitive, and understanding that total rewards is not a set it and forget it, right? Because your organization changes, the people that work in your organization changes, the needs of people change over time. And so your ability to sense that and then your ability to react and be agile, either from a compensation or a benefits perspective, to acknowledge that, set it and forget it might be forgotten. That's really the opportunity that, my hope is that total rewards leaders start looking at, is to say, how can we make sure that we continuously understand and then can be adaptable in the application of our strategy, demonstrated through, our commitments from a comp standpoint and our design from a benefit standpoint. The agility there, so important to the modern total rewards professional, largely because, and maybe I'm overstating it, changed. I mean, the idea of the Netflix and the Amazons of the world curating an experience based on your desired preferences. I'd say it's ruined us as customers, but it's also reset an expectation that total rewards leaders need to maintain as it relates to understanding their workforce, treating their workforce as customers, and demonstrating agility when internal or external disruptions require it.
I love that. And everything you're saying is like bringing me back to that earlier question about the folks that are listening, that are thinking, how am I going to bring this to my board, my C levels, et cetera, when if I say this, I know their response. This seems complicated. This is not a linear thing. Like it all sounds like something that I can't measure. Like what does success even look like if we do this correctly? And so I'd love to kind of get your sense of like what leaders need to really start to think about, or what leaders in total rewards need to start thinking about bringing to their leaders about investing wisely in this particular market, given what you've learned from the study.
Yeah, and here's where I'd go with that answer, Jason. Most of the ways that have been used before, right, in terms of measuring impact is, utilization, turnover, productivity, right? They are great metrics, and that if you are doing all of the right things from a total rewards perspective, you should see uptick there. Yeah, I think one of the things that has traditionally also been used from a measurement standpoint is annual engagement surveys, right? Where again, or talent surveys, whichever the vernacular makes sense within your organization. And you get a series of questions that are focused on total rewards, and year over year, this linear relationship between the data, but no real way to action on it. No real, so what? So why? And what do we do in order to increase a particular score that we have seen year over year over year, right? I think for a lot of organizations that, that tends to happen. It's that linear relationship, and the idea of improving a metric for, the sake of acknowledging its placement against your organizational goal, right? Um, the trouble with that is you don't necessarily understand why that metric is what it is, or what really is good as it relates to any of those metrics in the engagement survey. And so you can see there are ways that you can believe to measure effectiveness of total rewards. Um, but the actionability of it just, it continues to be a challenge. And it's why I'll continue to go back to the point. And, again, we saw it in the survey that when you sense the employee population, and I saw a comment in the chat there about conjoint. I, I think conjoint is a fantastic way to understand preferences in, real and material ways. And when you present optionality to employees to look at and gauge how they're feeling, therein lies a little bit of an opportunity to say this isn't about utilization, and maybe turnover or productivity are influenced by other things other than total rewards. But what we do know is that when we ask our employees, when we present optionality from a total rewards perspective and options that you would be willing to consider as an organization and your commitment to total rewards, when you do that and you gather that preference back and then you begin to act on it, those are places where you begin to see real metric changes, right? In the way that employees value you as a leadership, value the idea of employment with your organization, and they demonstrate that through things like NPS, right? Um, I'd encourage those that haven't looked at this particular way, um, to take it, maybe take that a little bit serious. We saw it happening in our results, the utilization of conjoint as a methodology of really understanding workforce segment preferences, and then making very deliberate choices in terms of how and where you want to show up from the rewards that you offer.
Amazing. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit just because I'm taking a look at the time, and
Yeah,
I
this
feel
went
like
quick,
you and
didn't
I,
it?
yeah, I feel like we could talk for another 3 hours, and it would be a great conversation.
Sure.
But I earlier on, and I think this is important because we talked a lot about how so many factors get kind of buried or placed into the same pot of total rewards. So there's just so many factors to consider. And in particular, you talked a lot about recognition, and even
Mhm.
recognition alone has so many vast, I guess, explanations, examples, et cetera, on what that even means. And so given the study that you did in 2018 and the one that you've just recently done, I'd love to just get your perspective of like the evolution of recognition that you've seen throughout.
Um, so I mean, evolution. Gosh, Jason, what a great word. Because again, it's not like recognition hasn't existed. For years and years and years. I mean, certainly in place 2018, certainly in place well before 2018. I think what our 2018 study showed is that, sort of that consistency on service anniversary, tenure-based recognition as a standard with, companies beginning that idea, that view into monetary and non-monetary based supplemental recognition. You know, budgeting incentive spend in a very particular way so as to create the opportunity for more just-in-time recognition. And so, I look at our study results. I've got it over here next to me, like level four organizations compared to level one as it relates to recognition. 2.8x more likely to provide team-based recognition, right? That is a that is a fundamental characteristic of a level four organization with recognition. The idea of taking it out of individual and acknowledging again that success is based on team. And that as the team supports each other in achieving the goals, so too should that team be recognized. And whether that recognition is monetary, whether it is experience, part of it is the collective bringing together of the individuals that created the opportunity of success. That I don't know that I heard a lot about that in 2018 and prior, but certainly here we are afterwards. Um, the other piece, and this I think really kind of speaks to the growing importance that recognition has as a component of total rewards, was level four organizations are 5.7 times more likely to integrate recognition into their total reward strategy. Right. So we talked about it earlier. There is org strategy and there is total reward strategy, and one supporting the other, and both moving symphonically to help that organization meet, achieve, and exceed their objectives. Right. What we're seeing now is that within that total reward strategy, recognition for level four organizations shows up. So that it is not just a plan or program, it is a commitment that those organizations are making to let employees know that we value contributions, and so much so that we are making sure that you understand that this is an integral part of our strategy. To me, Jason, that's not something that we saw, that we heard in 2018. Here we are just a few short years afterwards, and that more than anything else, I think demonstrates just why and how organizations are thinking about this particular trend across all of our findings in a unique and different way.
So okay, if you're talking to an organization
Mhm.
and you look at them and you run the analysis and you're like, hey, I hate to break it to you, but you're kind of like living in level one and two, and it doesn't look like you're going to get even remotely close to level three unless you make some dramatic shifts. What is your recommendation to organizations that are kind of in that stuck? They're not listening to the to the what everything else is saying. They're just like, nope, we're gonna stay here, and this is who we are. This is who we've always been. What would you what is the cost of that type of decision, I guess, is the question.
So, again, and I think that there are places, and again, this is going to be unique to every organization. There are some dimensions of maturity where it's absolutely appropriate to be a level one, level two, right? Um, and then other places where if you're looking to achieve your organizational objectives, you need to make commitments that put you into that level three, level four area. So again, I always think, Jason, examples are helpful, right? So the idea of a commitment to data analytics, to be able to use the data sources available to you, um, through your own HCM or other data gathering means, or through your third-party providers, to be able to bring that in and truly analyze and understand and predict what it is that employees are thinking and feeling and where you can show up, right? The further that you advance yourself from an analytics capability perspective, so too do you increase your maturity in that particular dimension. So again, each one of our maturity levels is made up of several dimensions, factors, and analytics being one of them. Another one is the technology experience, right? Every organization has a myriad of third-party providers and then internal technology stack that the more that you're willing to commit to the financial resources to integrate all of that with an employee-centered mindset, right? That's another factor of higher maturity. And so for an organization that's wondering or feeling like I'm stuck at level one or level two, right? This is about being mindful of where do you believe that you need to be in the future in order to attract and retain the talent that you're looking for, and what's the best place to make that investment right now, right? Is that technology? Is that analytics? Is that, a better approach to strategic communications? Is it, a further investment into recognition? Every one of those things is going to move the dial, from level one to two to three to four. It's about understanding your workforce and understanding your goals and aspirations in terms of the employee experience that you're looking to do. And what our study has showed is that if you focus on particular factors and you spend time and attention on those factors, you begin to increase your maturity in each one of those dimensions. And then, Jason, it's about determining, sort of short-term, longer-term strategy about where are you investing, why are you investing, what do you hope to achieve, and then what is it going to take to get there? So don't look at it as we have to do everything all at once. That's would never advocate for that. What I'd advocate for is to say, what are the factors that we believe that we need to advance ourselves on from a maturity perspective? And then what's it going to take to actually bring that into fruition?
Yeah, that's very, very powerful. And I love that it's, I think that it distinct making the distinction that look, whether you're a level one or a level four doesn't determine whether or not you're a good organization or not. It just said it simply states as it does, it's where you are in your maturity level, quite simply. And from that, you continue to grow and evolve as you start to become more mature. And the impacts of that are listed out in the report. And I think the one thing that I think, because I'm looking at the time too, and I'm trying to think of a way to sort of put a bow on this, which would be for, again, for the folks listening, is if they're going to try to bring this to the CFO, right? Or even the CEO, but probably like CRO, CFO, someone like that, even maybe COO. And it's like, trying to get inside their head, not the person bringing the information, but the C level. Like from their perspective, what are you seeing that like really defines a high impact rewards organization from their perspective? Like what they're like, oh yeah, that's what we do, and here's why. Like what are you seeing that really kind of brings that to earth?
Yeah. What I've enjoyed is when I see CFOs and CHROs working in lockstep. That to me, and again, the report kind of shows this, is that an organization should and will always be committed to their business objectives, right? And that's where, CEO, CFO, rest of the C-suite is always going to make sure that you focus on the business objectives, and where the CHRO's voice is, we will do that when we have the right workforce who is motivated, incentivized, to help us do that. Where again, your org strategy and your total reward strategy are working together. To me, if that happens, it means that that entire C-suite is organized and aligned on the idea that for us to be a successful level 4 organization, we have to think about the employee experience that we want to create, enable, celebrate, and communicate. And that only happens when those C-suite members are organized and delivering to those same objectives. Right? They all fundamentally understand what promises have we made to our people, and how and where do we want to demonstrate that promise in real and material ways. I think, Jason, when that happens, you see that type of level 4 maturity, you see that type of amplified employee experience, you see the heightened NPS scores that truly suggest that you as an organization are doing things that take care of your workforce, and your workforce is demonstrating that thanks by advocating for you to friends and families as, a great place to work, and a place where you can grow yourself personally and professionally.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you mentioned earlier, as we're both parents, it's, you know, firsthand too, that the impact of getting a message like this, where I say, I love
There it
you.
is.
Yeah, I love you, Dad. And actually, she spelled it dab, which is hysterical. I love that. I'm never gonna. That right there is worth more to me than any tchotchke tie, pair of socks, or belt that I ever received. From the holidays. That right
Hmm.
there does it. Right. That's what I live for. And I think that you could take examples like that and look at the organizations that you're working for and understand, like, I love how you kept talking about the team focused organizations that are, these, they're not silos, but they are like pockets. And if those pockets are united and working together and they know that they're growing together, that's where you're going to have so much success.
So much power there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Mike, thank you so much for your time. For everyone listening, we'll make sure everyone gets a recording. No one asked, so unfortunately, Mike, I guess I can't. I'll write you a check for $5 because I just asked. And then outside of that, I don't know, there were some other questions. I'll sync with Mike offline and see if we can get them answered, and maybe we'll do like a some sort of reply just to get people all the other questions answered there. But Mike, I cannot thank you enough for this incredible conversation. I will make sure everybody can easily find your study and go from there.
Wonderful. Jason, thank you for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
Thank you.